You want to talk about poverty in China? Let's talk about poverty in China because I've seen poverty in China and I've seen how the government fights poverty and serves the poorest. That's me, by the way, helping a poverty relief team deep in the mountains of southwest China in one of the most isolated villages ever. The government sent them there to live in that village for years, try to understand the local conditions, come up with solutions to fit the needs of each and every family and oversee the implementation. When I went there the first time in 2019, the poverty rate was 95% in that specific village. And that story isn't unique. Since 1980, over 770 million people have shaken off extreme poverty in China. And really, there's no need to compare poverty in China to poverty in the US or any other country because that's like comparing apples to oranges in terms of experience and national conditions. What China has done to help its population in terms of magnitude, of scale, of resources mobilized within that time frame has not been done by anyone else. And that's no exaggeration because China was poor, famine level poor. You see this red line? That's the percentage of rural population in China living under the absolute poverty line. And we're speaking about the Chinese countryside because historically, that's where poverty had been concentrated. And that red line, you see it drop over the course of 40 years to the point where in 2020, it zeros. And let me explain that. Since the end of 2020, there was 0 people in China living in extreme poverty. And here's what that means. The poverty line in China has been adjusted over the years to better reflect inflation levels. And in 2020, it was 4,000 yuan per year or roughly $1.6, $1.7 per day. But here's the thing. China takes a multi-dimensional approach to classifying poverty, and per capita income is not the only factor. It goes beyond that. Impoverished families have to have access to basic public services to be counted out of poverty. The 3 main ones are compulsory education for free, 9 years from 6 years old to 15 years old, basic medical insurance, and safe housing provided by the government. Here is a before and after photos of the housing conditions in the village that I visited, 2019 versus 2020. There's also a bunch of other boxes to tick, like access to safe drinking water, access to electricity, paved roads, phone coverage. It is a comprehensive set of criteria that is meant to create the necessary conditions for impoverished people in impoverished areas to live a decent, dignified life, pull themselves up, and be productive. And the current goal right now for China is to prevent these people from falling back into poverty and to help them develop sustainably in the long run. And this is what China now is calling rural revitalization. Now, just because China eradicated extreme poverty doesn't mean that there aren't low-income groups in the country or vulnerable families or that development is equal everywhere. Obviously, there's the urban-rural divide, but also the eastern part of China is historically more advanced than the western regions. But the China you see today is not the same as China from 10 years ago, is not the same as China from 20 years ago. And for hundreds of millions of people, life is dramatically better.